This is Close Encounters. Close Encounters. True stories, real people. Close Encounters on Cross Rhythms.
Yes, hello and welcome to Close Encounters with me, Anne Donaldson. And my guest today is Paul Sherwin. Paul, welcome to Close Encounters.
Thank you, Anne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you here today. So, Paul, you're currently pastor of the Gateway Church in Leek.
Yep.
And you love spending time with your family.
Yes.
Watching films.
Yes.
And some TV series.
TV series, yes. That's mainly around. I'm not a great reader.
Okay.
I think if I was a child now, I'd have some form of dyslexia.
Okay.
But I love stories, and so it's through films and TV series that to me it's like reading.
Oh, that's interesting.
Somebody was saying the other day that watching TV series isn't a hobby. I disagree with that, because for me it is a hobby. I'm getting into stories and that.
Yeah.
The same way as I can't read that well and that fast.
Yeah.
So I don't do books much.
No. Oh, how interesting. Yeah. So I know that you were local. You were born local to Stoke-on-Trent.
Yes.
And you have both farming and football in your background.
Very much so, yeah. More football than farming for me.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm from a farming family. I grew up in Warrington. Mm-hmm. So I went to Saltway Infants and Junior School, the Moorside High School in Sellerhead. And I grew up on a farm, and it was at the tail end of when it was being worked.
I see.
So my granddad was a farmer, my dad was a partial farmer, and also worked with the council down at Bucknell Park on the ground, like a groundsman around schools and things.
Yeah.
But by the time I got there, I can remember some cows down the field when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then it all cleaned up and it was all gone, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you actually involved? I think that someone who's involved in farming, they learn so many skills because there's the responsibility with the animals. Were you ever that involved or not?
No.
Okay.
So the cows, I mean, I can remember going with my dad down the field once when I was about 4 or 5 maybe. No health and safety back then, was there? So I can remember going down there, but other than that, you know, my dad and my granddad used to milk cows, have a big milking shed and everything.
Yeah.
But to me, you know, they were just sheds when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But I think it's in your blood a little bit. So, I've got an interest in that and an understanding of it a little bit. Love Clarkson's farm, obviously. But yeah, so it's part of who I am, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, and very apt for where you're pastoring, where you're ministering, because it's
quite
a rural area, isn't it?
It is a rural area, Leek, market town. It's basically, in one respect, every road out of Leek leads to the countryside.
Yeah.
So we're 10 miles from Stoke-on-Trent, and it's basically countryside nearly all the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. So you're growing up at school. Had you got influences around you? Were they good influences or not so good?
My childhood was happy. There were loads of friends. You'd spend hours away from the house, wouldn't you, when you were a kid back in the 70s, you know. You go out at dawn and basically come back at dusk when it's tea time or whatever. So there was all that. I think for me, my whole life revolved around football in my early days, from a very early age. So I did a lot of football. So the influences in my life that I can remember, the one influence mainly from the football side and from a life side as well, he was a wonderful guy, was my friend's dad, Barry Williams,
right,
who was a builder by trade, but such an encouraging fella.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's the one thing I remember about him more than anything. He was always encouraging you, and that's priceless, really. Isn't it?
I was going to say,
it really
that's
is priceless.
a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
That is, So at home, were the talk of God? Were you going to church? Was there a Christian ethos in the home?
I think you could say there was a Christian ethos. It wasn't. We weren't a Christian home.
No.
We lived on a farm, and the houses we lived in, my dad and his sister lived in semi-detached houses that used to be workers' houses for Ash Hall in Warrington. So they're only small 2 up, 2 downs. And my dad's sister and her husband and their family, they were the ones who mainly went to Warrington Methodist Chapel.
Right.
So I went when I was a kid. You used to go everywhere to Sunday school, didn't they, when they were kids?
Yeah.
So I went, but when my sister stopped going, I stopped going, and my mum and dad, everybody stopped going to chapel then.
Yeah.
You know, my mum's back in chapel now. She's 88 this year.
Oh, wonderful.
She's a regular in chapel. But really, you know, I wouldn't say we were an overtly Christian home in any way, really.
No.
No, not at all. No.
So you've mentioned your love of football. So how did that come? You know, how did that develop? And
I don't know. It just from a very early age. I mean, one of my first pictures, I was in this is going back to the early 70s. I would have been about 4, I think. Great big football, cap on, Stoke City strip.
yeah.
My cousin used to work at Stoke Ticket Office down when it was at Victoria Ground. So me and my dad used to get free season tickets every year. Through some of the darkest times of Stoke City, with Alan Durbin and the late times of Tony Waddington, seeing Gordon Banks and Jeff Hurst and all those type of players was kind of cool. And I don't know, it's just the football again. It's just found it something that was in my blood, really. And as I started to play, it turned out I was good at it. So
Yeah. So tell us about that. You got spotted for being a good player?
Yeah, I mean, it was all schools. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about this, how schools football now has virtually disappeared. Whereas when I was young, schools football took precedent over everything else.
Right.
So you could not, when I was scouted for Port Vale when I was 13, you couldn't play for the Vale in place of the school. You had to play for school.
All right.
And our games teacher made that very clear.
Yeah.
You know, and that, I think basically that was the law of the land at the time.
Right.
So schools football was really competitive. We were in Salahead. We used to play teams from Cheadle, teams from Bridge, teams from all over Leek and everything. So we had competitive leagues, and we used to get entered into the City Cup competition as well down in the cities. That's when we used to play some of the city teams down at Stoke-on-Trent, and we won that 3 years out of 4. So that was fun. So yeah, that was, and then from your school's football, I just got scouted for Port Vale.
Yeah.
And I was quite a homeboy at the time. You know, loved my home. My youngest son now is very similar to that.
Yeah.
So I had opportunities to go for trials in different places, but I just wanted to, and I did go to trials at Stoke, but didn't get very far down there. Yeah. But I settled on Port Vale. It was kind of like felt more of a family club to me at the time. Yeah. It was a bit smaller, I suppose less intimidating in a way.
Yeah.
Than Stoke was. Yeah. So that's where I ended up as a schoolboy to start with. So, and then as a schoolboy, you're going down all your school holidays. We used to just go down there and you know, we'd train and get involved with the apprentices down there. Yeah. Yeah, it was quite an experience. Yeah.
Good times. I think it'd be a good time for us to listen to your first choice of song. And you've chosen This Is My Desire.
Yes.
And I know it's very meaningful for you, so we'll perhaps look into that a little bit later as we're sharing. So we'll listen now. Thank you.
Okay.
This is my
You're listening to Close Encounters. I'm Anne Donaldson, and my guest today is Paul Sherwin. And before that song, Paul, we were talking about you being an apprentice professional footballer at Port Vale. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so when I left school, I ended up with 5 O-levels or equivalents. That was all you only needed 4 to get into further education back then. So I was looking to do day release when I went to Port Vale. So I'd been signed as an apprentice professional after being a schoolboy for a couple of years. So that was all I wanted to do. The difficulty I found, when I was at school, I used to play for school on a Monday night, Vale Reserves on a Wednesday night, school on a Friday night, Vale A team on a Saturday, and Vale youth team on a Sunday. But when I started to train every day, I was just injured all the time. So I can remember very early on, torn muscles, pulled muscles, all these types of things. That stunted me and hindered me quite a bit as I got into being an apprentice professional. So that only lasted the 2 years, and I was never signed as a professional after that at 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you feel? Was there disappointment with that?
Looking back on it, I can't remember any. Obviously, there would have been disappointment, but I can't remember it being too earth-shattering or anything like that. I'm the type of person in life who I just moved to the next thing.
Yeah.
So in short time, I'd got another job, and I was you moved and you just went and you just get on with the next thing that's in front of you in a way.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that lack of I'm not a reflective person by nature, so that lack of reflection can be helpful in those times because you just
Move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you went to work as what would you be, 18?
18
By
was then,
that
yeah.
time, into a factory setting.
Factory setting, steel foundry,
Yeah.
Ivy House Road, yes.
So there would be, that's very much adult environment.
Adult, all-male environment, apart from a few ladies in the office upstairs, but all-male environment,
Yeah. And how was that?
I mean, bear in mind, football is virtually an all-male environment as well, so it was nothing new to me in that respect.
No.
The lack of fresh air was a bit of difference. You spent all your time playing football outside, and then you're in a steel foundry, which, the best intention in the world, dusty, smoky, noisy place. And the first job I started on was a fettler, but I only had to do 3 days, and then I was moved to the moulding shop, which was a bit quieter. So that was okay, and then I eventually found myself in the quality control department. So that was my journey. So again, it was just like, you just go, you make friends, you muck in, you get on with your job. That's what and then you go out at night times, don't you? You know what I mean? That was life basically. Yeah.
But there was someone there who was clearly a follower of Jesus Christ.
There was. Yes, this is when I got it's about 2 years into my time there. So obviously I've been touching 20 by then. I got a job on the QA department, and you did a lot of work in QA in ultraviolet light, so you would end up in a dark box, basically working. And it's in those places where the door was shut, it was a little bit quieter, there's a lot going on outside. Somebody started to talk to me about their faith in Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'd not heard the good news of Jesus presented in this way. He was younger than me, but he was very forceful.
Yeah.
And he would be what you would call a hellfire and damnation kind of guy.
Okay.
Back in the. So this produced a lot of. We would basically argue about things.
Right.
And then eventually he started to bring me some leaflets in. He shared some books with me, because this is back in the early 80s, isn't it?
Yeah.
So as I remember, in church life back then, the Third World War, the end of time, the end of the world, and all that kind of stuff. And these were the books I was getting given to me about all this stuff,
Really cheerful stuff.
Yeah. So, but in the midst of all of that, God was obviously speaking to me over a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a long period of time?
Yeah, I mean, the guy who was our QA director, Stephen Burks, who was at Hanley Elam Church at the time, but eventually found his way to Penkell Christian Fellowship when Mike Broad was... And Mike Broad used to be in our sister company down at Trenton. He started to invite us to Christmas carol services and things like that. So I went along a few times, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can remember at one of them, there was the gospel presented, and I put my hand up when they said who would like to, give their life to Jesus, receive Jesus. And I put my hand up, but in hindsight, I believe that my hand went up was I was looking to find out more.
Right.
Yes. So from that time, I didn't go back to church again after that.
Okay.
Strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I had a girlfriend at the time, so she chewed me ear about it a little bit. What you doing? Give me that. So, and in a way, I look back and believe that I was expressing an interest there that wasn't necessarily, I want to be a Christian.
Yeah.
So from that point, then I went on a journey myself in between football, in between nights out, in between drunkenness, all this kind of stuff, in the background of my mind was this constant conversation, which was obviously with the Holy Spirit, as he's convincing me of the truth of everything I'm hearing.
Right.
And some of the leaflets that I got brought to me were about creation,
Yeah.
which had never popped onto the radar before then. I mean, it wasn't in school or anything, was it? And we didn't have internet, we didn't have YouTube or anything like that, and it wasn't on the 3 TV channels we had, and we didn't listen to the radio much apart from Radio 1. So that was a whole new ball game for me, really, looking into those things, and some of those arguments were really quite persuasive. So the debate about, I had a look at, well, is it aliens? What's this evolution all about compared to creation? And I got to a stage where in the arguments we were having, I was not winning any.
Yeah.
And in the process of that, God was obviously convincing me of sin, of righteousness and judgment.
Wow. I think this is a good place to listen to your next song, because we want to hear more about that conviction. So the next song you've chosen is Awesome in This Place, and we'll listen to it now.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, this is Close Encounters with me, Anne Donaldson, and my guest today is Paul Sherwin. Paul, we were hearing about how the Holy Spirit was there in the background, starting to convict.
Yes. Yeah, so that was when I was still working on the steel foundry, and in this process of time, I met my wife.
Okay.
So I was 24 when I met my wife. She was 25. Within a year, just around a year, we were married.
I love
So that was amazing, and we're still there. It's 34 years this year, which is amazing.
Congratulations.
So yes, 1992, I do remember it. So I got married, and then you're into a different. You're not just responsible for yourself, then, are you? And then it changed for me radically when my first child came along, our Bethany.
Yeah.
And I can remember then the feeling of when she was getting towards about 6 months old. I was very much aware that I knew this truth, and I believed this truth about Jesus.
Yeah.
About his death for me, about him, forgiving my sins, about his resurrection. I knew these things and I believed them, but I'd not put anything, I'd not moved my faith towards that.
Yeah.
I'd not given my life to him. I was still living as I would normally do. But then I'm responsible for a little child coming into the world.
Yes.
So that galvanized my thoughts a little bit. And that's when I, at the age of 29, I gave my life to the Lord then. I gave my life to Jesus. I thought, yes, Lord, you've convinced me now. And I want you to forgive my sins. And I want this new life. And I want you to come into my life and be my Lord and Saviour. And that's where I did it. And I wasn't in church at the time.
Interesting.
I was just going to work, coming home, doing the normal family things. So I was at my house basically, and just made that decision. Right, I'm going to become a Christian, and told Sally, which was a shock to Sally, to say the least. And she had her own wrestlings, but I give thanks to God that 6 months later she gave her life to the Lord as well.
Wonderful.
And I like to think it's because she's seen a change in me.
Yeah.
But I started going to the local Methodist church in Cheddleton. I was living in Cheddleton then because I met my wife. She was from Cheddleton. And we bought a house and we were living there. And in one respect, our lives, we were married, we had a house, we had a car, we had a baby, everything seemed hunky-dory. But in the process of that, I was always aware there's something missing. As much as comes into your life, as much as you seem to have it all together, and you've got a job and everything's going well, there was just something missing all the time. And it was that time I thought, this is Jesus that's missing. Yeah. And I need to have him in my life now, for not just for me at that time, but for my family as well, really. So that's when we started on that journey.
And what changes? Because he does transform us, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So you know, there are things that you suddenly find you're not doing, or there's things you are doing.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously your devotion changes, but I think I was going to work, and the immediate change in me was my language cleaned up overnight.
Really?
Yeah, and I know there's mostly Christians out there, and that's a struggle they have, you know. But for me, I have my own struggles, but one of them isn't bad, and that changed overnight. So when I was going to work on the steel foundry, people noticed that straight away, because communication on a steel foundry is largely swear words, and if you took the swear words out, I don't think we'd understand what we were saying to one another. You know, so my language was really horrific. So that for that to change so dramatically overnight was noticeable for people.
That's wonderful.
And that's one thing that God did for me immediately. And then obviously I started to share that I'd become a Christian, and I think one of the things that I can look back on in my time when I got made redundant from work, I think I was given a week's notice, but I remember just having a sense of purpose in it all, and people were amazed that I kept working right up to the last minute of my time of notice. And I can remember somebody bringing me something on the Friday afternoon. You know, I'll do that. Because you get to a stage where you're serving the Lord, aren't you? You know, you're not upset at people so much anymore. You know, you can see God's got a plan for you, and you know, He unfolded that plan in my life in the years after that. Like, you know, so I can look back and think, God got His hand on that, and so those are some of the changes. And I think through I mean, obviously growing up in the 70s and 80s, I think for guys it was a far more aggressive time maybe than what it is now. So the football side of it, you know, you had to be competitively aggressive in your football, and the steel foundry was a masculine kind of place to work. And one of the things I remember my sister noticed in me was some of my aggression disappeared in a situation that she was facing, and she was like taken aback with it. You know? And I think those are some of the things that just some grace and some mercy starts to appear in your life. As God starts to work those things out. And He's still working the competitiveness out of me, and He's still working the sarcasm out of me. But that it started quite early, really, that change that happened in your life.
And you were saying the first song we listened to, you chose "This Is My Desire." That was very meaningful to you at that time, as now even. Yes,
So I can remember, because after I'd been to the local Methodist church for a couple of times, and it was the preacher, it was the lady on the organ, and it was me on a Sunday evening. That was it, you know. And my wife came home from work one time, and she'd heard about a healing ministry through one of her customers that was coming to Leek Pentecostal Church, as it was then, which is now Gateway Church. And Sally volunteered that me and her, this was before she was a Christian, volunteered that we would take this lady because she wanted to be prayed for. So that's when I first rocked up at what was Leek Pentecostal Church at the time, and that became my church, and I've never moved from there since. In church life, type of thing.
And that song is part of
that song. It was in the early days. There was a youth minister called Carl Butler who came from it was either New Zealand or Australia, and he came from there, and he introduced that song. And I think it was round about the time when Hillsong had introduced it, and it was just, I can just remember it in my early Christian life, when you are, you know, you're continually dedicating your life to the Lord each and every day. That song, which is basically a sung prayer, it's not a worship song in the praise and thanksgiving. It's a prayer basically sung, and it meant so much to me. It still means so much to me. When I hear it, if we sing it in church, I'm taken back to 1996, 97, when that dedication. But to me, I meant every word of it, and I still mean every word of it.
That's beautiful.
And that's why that song is so important to me. It's a song of consecration to the Lord for me. And
And we're going to listen to a further choice, which is Indescribable by Chris Tomlin. Do you want to share a little bit about why you've chosen that.
Yes. So as I was saying, I'm not the most reflective person in the world, but so when I was choosing these songs, it was quite a challenge for me. But I did a lot of schools work through Synapse Youth Work Project in Leek, and through my journey of faith to becoming a Christian, the whole evolution creation debate was part of my journey.
Yeah.
And coming to a situation where I just didn't have the faith to believe evolution anymore. But creation made so much more sense to me based on the evidence that I was seeing. Yeah. And Indescribable is also linked to a sermon that was done by Louis Giglio. They were kind of combined with one another. And he did it all about the universe and about the stars and everything and all those kind of things. And I was sharing this in school as part of RE lessons.
Yeah.
So this is what creation's about. This is why people believe it. This is how it differs from evolution and everything. So I had some really great conversations in school with kids all around those things, because they're not necessarily exposed to the whole idea and thought behind creationism.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I just used to find that a joy. And it was because it was part of my coming to the Lord, really.
Yeah.
In finding my creator.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Real people.
Welcome back to Close Encounters on Cross Rhythms with me, Anne Donaldson, and my guest today is Paul Sherwin. And I know that the words, some of the words in that song just have such meaning for you, Paul, don't they?
They do. I was sharing with Anne before the show about a quote one of the ladies in church gave us on Sunday, where it was, time is measured in minutes, but a life is measured in moments. And sometimes a song has just got a moment for me. And in that song, as in the next one that will come as well, there's just a line. And in the song we've just had, it was, "You know the depths of my heart, yet you love me the same." And that to me links to the whole consecrating yourself to the Lord type of thing. Because sometimes as Christians, certainly in my early Christian life, you look at yourself and look at Jesus, and your journey is to become more like Jesus, but you can feel a million miles away. But you're still walking with the Lord, and God is still walking with you in His grace and in His mercy. And He's, I shared about how my language cleaned up when I first got saved. But there's a walk of consecration, a walk of sanctification that happens in every Christian's lives. And we're all wrestling with something along the way. But just knowing the fact that what I know about my heart, He knows it deeper and He knows it more, yet He loves me the same.
Yeah.
It's just a phenomenal kind of comfort and a kind of truth that holds you, because in so many ways we don't measure up. And I always say to people, yeah, but Jesus knew that before He saved you. He knew what He was getting into. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves that, don't we? And a line in the song like that helps me to remember that His love is great.
Yeah. And I think for people listening, Paul, to that statement, that's just going to be such an encouragement, because we're often hard on ourselves. We're often harshest with ourselves. And yet it was while we were still sinners that Christ died for us. And so it is this, we are acceptable to God because of Jesus.
Yes, very
and
much so,
like you say, it is a journey of transformation.
Yes.
Certainly your life, my life, and many others. Yeah, it's fantastic. So when you were at school, I'm sure you had some challenging conversations, interesting conversations.
They were interesting. When I was doing the schools work, you had interesting conversations, because you were bringing to the kids stuff that they'd never heard before and never really considered. So it was quite challenging for them in a way. So, like I say, I did a lot of research around creationism and around science and faith and all these types of things. And I can remember in one lesson just talking to the children about having purpose in your life. Now, if you believe that you're just a product of evolution, mindless chance, unguided processes, and you are there's no more value to you than a rock on a beach, that's going to impact how you see yourself. But the story of creation basically tells you that God creates you on purpose, and nobody's a mistake, and he creates you on purpose for a purpose. And I can remember when I used to do year 9 classes that sometimes you'd talk to them about what do you think their purpose is, and some kids would openly admit that they didn't feel they had any purpose. And that's a hopeless situation. And what is faith is the substance of things hoped for. So if the enemy can get people to feel hopeless, well, where you dropping your faith? Where's your faith dropping?
Yeah.
Whom is your faith dropping? But there's that whole concept that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
That's it.
Which is what you said on Psalm 139. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and I'm loved, and I'm cared for, and his eye is on me, and his love is towards me, his thoughts are towards me. And it's just a phenomenal thing, really.
It is.
The God of the universe, who cast all those stars out into space, wants to come and live in our hearts and be with us and walk with us. Is good news.
It's
Amen?
very good news. Very good news indeed. Yeah. And so your faith, you had this period of time working with the schools in Leek, and but then something changed. I believe you sense God prompts you to take some action with regard to your home.
Oh, that was far earlier than that, Anne.
Oh, was it?
It was, yes.
Okay.
Yes, obviously
Chronologically.
Chronologically, no. I mean, that is going back. I got saved in 96. That is going back to 1997, 98.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Early on in your walk.
Yes. At the time, the church had 2 buildings, sold one, moved to the other, and got themselves into some debt. Nothing too dramatic. But I felt God at that time, and bear in mind I'd been saved 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Had a young family. I think 98 our Joe came along. In year 2000 we moved into our apartment in church. And what God had said to me was, back then, I want you to sell your house and pay off that debt in church and move into a house that I'll make for you. And that was just an internal voice that I heard. But I acted upon it. I took it to the church leadership. They witnessed with it. We put an apartment together. Me and my family moved in beginning of September 2000.
Right.
And I can remember kneeling on my living room floor in Cheddleton at the time as the house was being emptied, and just thinking, what on earth am I doing? Got a lot of security here. But my consecration song, was basically, I'm giving it all to you, Lord.
Yeah.
And then he asks me this, and I say yes. But then I'm thinking to myself, really?
Yeah.
I'm saying yes? But that's when I knelt on the floor in my living room, and I said to the Lord, what on earth is this all about? And in the year this is in the year 2000, he said, I want you to lead that fellowship. I know he'd been saved 3-4 years. And that was the thing that happened. So my school's work was out of the apartment, the house that God had built for me. So that was that. In a way, I think the school's work was part of my training for the pastoring that I'm now doing. So does that answer your question, Anne?
It does, and also I
Yes.
see how God uses what we think as a long time. So if I remember correctly, you said you were about 10 years of looking into creationism before you actually became a follower of Jesus.
Yes.
So during that time, you'd explored so many different aspects of evolution. what do you encounter when you get to school?
Yeah.
Now you've got faith. Now you're a follower of Jesus.
Yes.
You are equipped
Yeah.
to answer these questions. I just love how God does
I know,
that.
yes,
He
yeah,
takes a period
yeah.
of time that you think, if only that had happened sooner. But actually,
Yeah.
He is working His
Yeah.
purposes
Yeah.
out. So that's really beautiful how that's
yeah.
worked out.
It's one of the things I've learned over the years. We want stuff very quickly, but God's got a life's work
That's right.
to produce in us.
Yeah.
And sometimes He seems to take longer than we'd like.
Mm-hmm.
I think my next song, it kind of feeds into that, do it again.
Yeah.
But a line in that song is, I thought by now that these walls would have fallen, something along those
Yeah.
lines. And how many times that's been my cry. Lord, I thought this would have changed by now.
Yeah.
I thought this would have fallen by now. I
Yeah.
thought this would have happened by now.
Yeah.
But in the process of the patience, He forms resilience in us. He tests our faith. What did it said about Joseph? I think it's in one of the Psalms where it says, they bound him in chains and until chains and shackles, and until the word of the Lord came to pass. The word of the Lord tested him.
Yeah.
And I believe that it was the dreams, the visions that Joseph had. But until that came to pass, that was testing him.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it's kind of like God saying, do you believe
Yeah.
that I can still do what I
Yeah.
said I would do
Yeah.
back in those dreams? Do you believe that?
Fantastic. Fantastic. So let's listen to Do It Again.
Okay.
Wonderful song. Thank you.
Walking around these walls.
You're listening to Close Encounters with me, Anne Donaldson, and my guest today is Paul Sherwin. And Paul, I've been loving this. But time goes so quick, but before we come to the end, tell us what's current, what's God speaking or doing currently in and through you.
So I think at the church at Gateway in Leek, we've just finished renovating our whole building, which is a promise that God gave me specifically, back in the year 2000, that He would see our building renovated, which is a big old Wesleyan Sunday school, so it's a lot of building, renovated debt-free, which is exactly where we are now.
Wow.
We've just finished the final part of the renovation, which we're so grateful for. But I feel that God is, we hear about the quiet revival and people coming back to church, and
Yeah.
God's on the move in the nation. And I think for us as a church, we're focusing quite a lot on getting people to share faith and share the good news of Jesus. We've done some work on the good news of Jesus, what it is, the simplicity of the good news, specifically around the resurrection of Christ, how important that is, to believe that Jesus is risen from the dead as we're coming into Easter as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in the next song we're going to be, I've chosen, there's one line again, one of these moment lines, where it talks about when my sin met the Most High. And to me that's just a wonderful story, a wonderful example of how when Jesus hung on the cross and He became sin, our sin met the Most High and He overcame it, and through His death and resurrection we can now have life, and we can have forgiveness, and we can have newness of life, and we can walk in the Spirit with God. And my heart is just that other people can come to a place in their lives when they can have that realization, yes, when my sin met the Most High, He cleansed me, He renewed me, He gave my life new purpose, He showed me how my life was on purpose, for a purpose. That's my heart's desire, really, for the church to be able to grow into that moment where we see God really moving again in our nation and many people coming to the Lord from all walks of life.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. Paul, thank you so much for today. Thank you for coming in. It's been an absolute delight. And we are going to listen to that song that you've just referred to. It's called The Blood. Thank you.
Bless you.
Close Encounters on Cross Rhythms. True stories, real people.